Got it. It's 5. We're ready. Y'all ready? I'll go ahead and call us into session for the workshop and declare a quorum of 7 members present. Item C1, consideration, discussion, possible action related to board operating procedures. Dr. Ely.
Mr. President, members of the board, as you know, we make it a practice to revisit our board operating procedures, usually annually. We went over these procedures in pretty great detail at our January workshop. We had anticipated that we would have some time at the February workshop for us to look over the changes that were made based on the discussion in January, but time did not allow last month, so we have it first thing on the docket tonight. And you have 2 copies in front of you. One is with the yellow on it is the one that's highlighted that shows the changes that were made, and then the other one is just a clean copy. And so I just would like to, if it's okay with the group, just kind of highlight where those changes are, so to speak. And the first one that shows up chronologically here is under communication. I'm sorry, we don't have page numbers. That's a change we need to make for next year. That'd be change 1 for next year. Page numbers. So what we did on citizen request complaint to individual board member, we took the language from BBE local. We struck refer to flow chart, and we added that language in there, and you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those bullets that reflect that language from board policy BBE local. It talks about what we do, what a board member would do if they have a request or a complaint or a request from a citizen. So moving on to the next page. We did try to be a little bit more accurate by saying that the note cards for folks who would like to address the board are located next to the sign-in sheet, because we're in a new boardroom and it's kind of different setup here. And that the would be turned into the assistant or clerk, which in our case is Carrie Horn. Go to the next page. This was cleaning up the situation where we had this extra sentence in the Open Meetings Act that said if 5 persons sign up to address the board on the same topic, a spokesperson will be selected to speak for 3 minutes, and that does not follow our board policy. It actually is correct on the page before, so we just struck that sentence and changed executive secretary to executive assistant. Under board meetings, we changed second Tuesday to third Tuesday, because it's been third Tuesday for a long time. We just never caught it before on here. So it is, regular scheduled meetings are on the third Tuesday. Going up a few more pages, we incorrectly identified the state statutes. It's the Texas Government Code, not the Texas Education Code when we talk about executive session. So we made that change. And then at the bottom of the, I guess it's third to last page, we had repeated something that had been in another section, so we just struck it from there and kept it earlier in the document. And then under board development, we talked about the board evaluation and goal setting. At the workshop, retreat, training each winter, the board and superintendent team will evaluate their effectiveness, review operating procedures, kind of what we're doing here, and conduct new board member orientation, which we do whenever we have a new board member join the group. We changed the review and revises core beliefs and commitments each year based on your feedback from as needed to annually. Struck that next bullet and incorporated it into that third one there. The district's vision statement, belief statements, priorities and goals are disseminated to employees and via the public district website at school and community events. And then what we had to clean up, since our elections have changed a couple years ago to November, officer elections are held following the November general election. We said the next meeting. Sometimes that doesn't always happen because of canvassing and those types of things. So we just said following the November general election, we'll have officer elections. And those are a summary of the conversation that we had a couple months ago. And if there's any other things we'd like to talk about, or other changes you'd like for us to consider, I'd love to hear them.
Thank you. Anyone? Are you looking for action to approve this tonight?
I'm sorry, we are looking for action to approve. Thank you, Mr. Harris. We would love to see approval of these board operating procedures as presented.
I make the I make the motion that we approve the CSISD board operating procedures as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion, all opposed? Okay, the motion carries 7-0. That takes us to item C2. Consideration, discussion, and possible action related to high school boundary adjustment process and schedule. Dr. Ely.
Thank you, Mr. Harris, members of the board. So as I think as everybody is familiar with, at the last board meeting in February, the board did decide that we'd be going through a boundary adjustment process to address overcapacity issues at College Station High School and capacity availability at A&M Consolidated High School. I said that right, Des? Okay. And so as a result of that, we need to have time to meet. The process will look a little different than it has in the past, in that we will be doing the work as a board, and it will be during regularly called meetings. We have the board determined not to have a citizen committee come and work privately and then bring one option forward. Rather, you've tasked the administration to come up with multiple options and bring to you. And bring forward and work through it. So I think it would be important for us to have a number of meetings in fairly quick succession so we can keep the momentum going in the various changes that you will be instructing us to look at and review. So what we have done is some very tentative dates down here. I sent out a poll to try to gather some dates. Your 7 busy individuals, so trying to find time for 7 busy individuals is proving somewhat difficult. And so let me just kind of walk you through the options that we have down here. I would propose that our first meeting would be next Wednesday, March the 28th. That was something that was available for everybody. And this one would consist of a presentation from the administration on the process that we use to come up with the various options that we would be proposing, and a presentation of those options at that meeting. Perhaps you could direct us at that time, but I think it would be just a good opportunity for us to lay out everything that, based on our research, that we would be bringing to you at that time. And then follow that pretty closely by a community forum. We would obviously take that and put it online, make it available to the community for their review, and have a meeting about 5 days later, which would be Monday, April the 2nd, and have a public forum for the purpose of gathering feedback from the community in a face-to-face manner. We will obviously have opportunities for feedback via electronic means, and as well as your emails, and we can set up a feedback at csisd.org if we'd like to as well, like we have done in the past. We'll be able to take those at any time, but we'd like to set up at least one, or set up this one right after the presentation of the options that Monday afterwards. So I believe that works for everybody. I'm looking for concerned looks or head shakes, so about whether the second works.
Well,
As far as you know?
as far as I know, I don't want to jinx anything, but
Indeed.
there's something else going on that night that could be huge.
Oh, gosh, I didn't even think about that.
I'm not gonna. Okay, fair enough.
True. And we have not talked about a time. We could talk about that here in just a little bit.
I'm not even thinking about it. I'm not even thinking about it.
Wanting to continue to keep the momentum, I have a tentative date in here of another board workshop to process that feedback, and I have that on Wednesday, April the 4th, so it'd be 2 days after what could be a very special event and the public forum. The one conflict that I know that we do have is district track meet. Don't know who might have offspring who might be running, but based on the schedule that I've been given, again, weather permitting, that would be preliminaries that day, and preliminary running events would start at 5 p.m. So that's why I have 3 o'clock as a potential. Maybe we meet early that day. So
Where is the district track meet?
College Station? Buddy? Where's district track meet? College Station?
It's so
District
local.
So, again, we could talk about that. Then I'm coming back that next week, Monday, the April the 9th. That seemed to work for everybody. We do have a regularly scheduled board meeting on Tuesday, April the 17th. If we could avoid it, it would be nice to just do work that's not boundary adjustment and do all the other work that we do on that, but I don't know based on these other dates that we have here. The other dates that I have there, Thursday, April 19th, Thursday, April 26th, Wednesday, May the 9th. Everybody can make it with the exception of Mr. Schaefer's schedule is not allowing that at this time. Others, we were having more than one person miss. So we were, after that week, that week of April the 9th, we were having trouble finding times that work for all 7 folks. So we could, oh, it does? Okay. Okay. So actual work after the presentation that the administration does on the 28th, we'd have a public forum on Monday the 2nd, and we'd have a meeting on the 4th, the 9th, and the 26th. That's 4 meetings. And then have potential action on Tuesday, May 15th. Is that enough? Is that enough meeting dates? Should we put more?
Well, I don't know that I would characterize it quite the way you did that. I mean, I don't think we have to have a set number of meetings. I think having these options, and the reality is I think, go until we're done. And whether that's, I mean, I have no idea what you're going to present. And in theory, April 4th, we could be done. I mean, I'm not saying we will be. I don't think we will be.
I don't think we will be.
But I mean, the reality is we don't know the work that we're going to have to do. So I think we'll go until we go. I would like to suggest that we at least keep the possibility of the 17th
Okay.
there, because we know that is a regularly scheduled meeting that everyone's already calendared. So, and to me, making use of the time and trying to get it done seems to make sense.
To me, it makes sense for everybody else to go ahead and block off the 19th, April 19th and May 9th, just to be safe. And then hopefully we won't need them. But if we do, then they'll be on there one way or the other.
Perhaps after a meeting or two, we'll have a better sense.
Right, yeah. I mean, I can't imagine we're going to need 7 meetings to do this. I mean, I hope not.
I understand.
But, I mean, to me, it makes sense for everybody just to block all these off, and then we'll get rid of them as time goes on based on how well things go.
Do we feel like we need to take whatever action we take at the May 15th regular board meeting?
We don't necessarily have to do that. We could certainly take action in one of these workshop sessions. It kind of depends on where we are in the process. One of the good opportunities to do it in a regularly scheduled meeting is we already have constituent feedback on the agenda for a regular scheduled meeting. And so if somebody were to wanting to address that, one more time, or the direction we possibly might be going with a recommendation, then it would give them an opportunity to do that. But it doesn't preclude us to do that or even add that to another meeting if we wanted to.
That was going to be my question. We've obviously got one time set aside for public input, but, as the work progresses through a meeting or 2 or 3, is there a time to get more after that?
Yes, so we would obviously have the opportunity for electronic feedback all the way through the
Well, sure.
process, and it does not preclude us from calling another, having it in conjunction with a workshop or calling another public hearing. All of that is still open for us.
Okay.
So to clarify, for public input, the way this tentative schedule is, they'd have Monday, April 2nd. Could they talk on Tuesday, April 17th?
Yes, they would be able to.
Okay.
If it's not an agenda item, they would talk about it at the time designated in the meeting, at the beginning of the meeting. If it were an agenda item at the regular meeting, they would talk about it at that time. So, correct. Good point. So,
Other thoughts? I mean, I'd say I agree with the idea. Pencil them all in, 19th of April and May 9th being lower priority, given that we're not all available, and only use those if needed.
so would we be okay in getting out to the public the March 28th meeting? Again, we've got to talk about times here in a second. The public forum on April 2nd, and maybe those first two, the 4th and the 9th, right there, putting those out,
Absolutely.
just so people can plan ahead.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, and we can increase our time on that Tuesday, April 17th in the workshop, correct? I mean, if
We could.
I mean, to me, that would be a good use of time too, even if we had to start an hour earlier.
Yeah.
You know, to get that in as well. If we needed some more time at that point.
I think by the 9th, we probably have a good idea if we need some extra time in the regular meeting or regular workshop, on April 17th. And then could start maybe nailing down if we think we need one or two more, whatever. Sometimes maybe that we haven't thought about or dates that might work.
Okay.
What about times for starting? 5 o'clock, 5:30, 6? Hate to do it much later, but I'll leave it to the will of the group. With the exception of that,
April 4th.
that April 4th.
What time did we normally start with the committee?
5 or 5:30.
I-
Can we get here by 5?
Oh, yeah, I was gonna
Can you
say,
hear?
oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, I think
I'd
that's
even
fine.
go earlier if we needed to.
April 4th being the exception.
You want to go and try to do April 4th and do it earlier? Do we need to check our work calendars and things like that before we commit to a time on that one?
I'm good with earlier. I always like
the
earlier.
4th?
Yeah.
I can do 3. That could give us a couple hours.
I don't anticipate us in each of these meetings going much beyond an hour and a half or two, because you will be reacting, talking with stuff, giving us direction, and we'll be working in between meetings to get those suggestions or questions that you have back to you. So
I think that's a good point. I think keeping these to a reasonable length is very beneficial. Last thing we want to do is get everybody tired.
okay, so we've got 5 o'clock meeting time, beginning with the exception of April the 4th, and that one is at 3. And we'll schedule March 28th, April 2nd, April 4th, and April 9th. And then, of course, April 17th is on.
We do the public forum starting at 5:30.
Okay, perfect.
Is the location for everything right here?
I don't have those just yet.
They're having a hard time hearing us, so we're gonna have to talk into the microphones better. Everybody, yeah, everybody.
Nobody can hear me? Sorry.
Jeff.
Me, basically, my voice doesn't carry well.
Okay, I think I have what I need. Anybody else have any more comments on the schedule? Okay, thank you.
Okay, you got it? Okay. Will you send us,
I will summarize this and send it out. Yes, sir. So start at 5 with the exception of the one on April the 4th that starts at 3, and the public forum will start at 5:30. And we'll get you locations. Hopefully they will be here.
How many can we fit in here?
Chuck, how many can we fit in here? How many can we fit in here? 200? And Transportation Center?
Really? Wow.
All right, that takes us to item C3, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to the options for 2018 Tier 3 board training.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. This is a big calendar night, so we're on our next calendar event here. We started talking about this early in the year. I can't remember when this was, about our options available for us for our Tier 3 board training. As you all know, members of the boards of trustees, you have to get 5 hour. You have to get 2 MIV-8 training for at least 3 hours. Some Tier 2 hours, depending on if it's a legislative year, and then Tier 3 is additional CEU or credits for board training. An experienced board member has to get 5 additional hours. A brand new board member, Mrs. Nolan, has to get 10 additional hours of Tier 3 credit. We have traditionally got this as a board team at the TASA-TASB General Convention usually in the end of September. And that is still an option for us. We did throw out the options, though, of doing a summer training. There's a couple of options of those. That's with Texas Association of School Boards again, and their Summer Leadership Institute options. Just want to talk a little bit about scheduling conflicts with TASA-TASB. It is scheduled for September 28th through 30th, 2018 in Austin this time. That is, for you Aggie football fans, that is the Arkansas game weekend, which we all know is in Dallas. And for both of our comprehensive high school football teams, they are at home that week. And Consol is playing Huntsville Friday at 7:30. College Station High School is playing Caney Creek at home at 7:30 as well. I believe that's the first district ball game, but I may not be right on that. But so those are some conflicts that we have with that. We have the 2 potential options in the summer at the Summer Leadership Institutes. They are both Thursday through Saturday events, all day Thursday, all day Friday, and just Saturday morning. So oftentimes people don't stay for the Saturday morning, I would imagine, because there's only a couple sessions. But Thursday and Friday. And those start, one is in San Antonio, that is June 14th through the 16th. And then it is again 2 weeks later in Fort Worth, June 28th through 30th. So if baseball fans on the board would note that College World Series starts the Saturday on the 16th, and it ends on Wednesday the 27th, if you get to that third game in that. So
He didn't care about jinxing.
we're just talking baseball.
Yeah.
So
Just
knowing you as I do. So those are some of the conflicts that are on that. And I'm just curious as to the board's thinking. Do we want to continue to go with some of the senior leadership team to TASA-TASB in September? Do we want to try something different and go this summer for our Tier 3 training? I throw it open to you, Mr. Harris.
Thank you. Well, part of, I think, this discussion we wanted to have because last fall we had some significant conflicts with the TASA-TASB convention that we had traditionally done. That time it was, I believe, Alabama game that was a home game, and a fair number of folks that were on the board wanted to participate in that, and they had their kids' activities also Thursday and Friday night. So I'm anxious to hear your thoughts and how important you all think it is for us all to attend the same event, or if you think spreading it around is okay, or something different. Keep doing what we've been doing.
Okay, so the one in San Antonio is Thursday, Friday, and Saturday morning, is what you said?
Yes, ma'am.
I would love to try that.
Yes, ma'am. June 14th through 16th.
That's the only one that's in San Antonio, with the 28th through 30th.
Is in Fort Worth.
Sorry,
I can make it work.
I know.
28th through 30th works better for me, but
28th through 30 works better for
that's
me
the
as
first
well.
weekend of the College World Series, so if A&M does get in,
They're more likely to be there at the beginning.
Well, that'd probably be the
Given that
best
we've
time to
never
be
won a
there.
game, those will be the only games we're playing is that weekend. So
We've
not
won a
that we're
game.
gonna make it that far regardless, so. I don't mean, but I'm flexible, I can do whatever.
Well, 14 through 16 would be tough for me because I'm supposed to be in Colorado on the 17th.
I'm good either one in June. And obviously, we're all steering away from the fall one, but I mean, we're always talking about the Aggie football game that weekend. But I mean, I'm pretty sure last year was homecoming at one of our high schools, and I mean, that's just there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
So
Do we know when homecoming for the high schools is?
I don't know, we've decided that yet.
sorry.
I'm gonna have to move some things around if it's June 28th. See if I can move some things around.
I understand. Well, how important is it that we all go to the same thing?
I think it's good for us to all go there and be able to attend some sessions together and be able to do some team building while we're there. I do think there's value in that. We also though have the Schlechte Center event that we have traditionally done in January, so we don't necessarily have to since we're doing that.
Okay,
I'll do whatever, by the way.
that's kind of where I am. Those both I can make work.
Are we thinking more towards summer then rather than fall?
I am. Fall is very
I think
difficult.
so.
We've never tried it. Might as well try.
Okay, let's try summer.
And what I'm hearing is you would have to move around the
I'm gonna
later
see if I can
date.
move some stuff around.
Somebody would have to move around the beginning date.
So that's the 28th, 29th, and 30th?
It'd be 28th, 29th, and
And
30th.
that's where?
Fort Worth Omni.
Okay. I have a wedding on the 30th.
No, well, but it's.
That's in Baton
but we're
Rouge.
done by- But we're done.
You'd
by-
probably be done Friday night.
Okay.
We'll fly on out.
All right, that helps.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that takes us to C4, consideration, discussion, possible action related to setting another date and time for management oversight workshop for facilities maintenance. Dr. Ely.
Thank you, Mr. Harris, members of the board. As you know, we do, as a part of our board policy, we have management oversight workshops for some of our larger divisions in College Station ISD. We do 2 of those a year. Traditionally, we have done those in about October, November, the first one, and usually in about April for the second one. As we have already discussed in item C2, we're going to be together a lot during April, already doing boundary adjustment. So in talking it over with the Board Executive Committee, we're wondering if we could push that to our management oversight workshop, which this spring would be for facilities maintenance. Could we push that perhaps to June? And do we have some times available that might work for folks in June? What we'd be looking for, traditionally it's about 2 hours, and we usually do it 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Don't serve dinner with it, and work through that process. So I don't know what June is looking like for anyone. Anybody?
Early June?
Early June would be great.
Is like
I'm asking the question.
is 11:30 to 1:30 even an option?
I think it should. I think it could be, absolutely.
I like 11:30 to 1:30, early June.
Tuesday, June 5th.
I'm out the first week, before you start that first week stuff. I'm out the first week.
Oh, yeah.
I'm out with your children.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We could June 11th.
Tuesday, June 12th. 11:30 to 1:30.
Works for me.
I can do that.
Any no's?
Yeah.
Could have been the easiest one yet. Who knew?
2 months out, 3 months out. June 12th from 11:30 to 1:30. Missing anything? Okay. We'll get this information back out to you as well.
June 12th, 11, keep talking for a minute while I put
Like my calendar's filling up right before my very eyes.
I know.
Doing the district's business, yes, sir.
Quality events.
Have mercy.
Apologize for that. It's just easier to do it. We're all face to face when
Oh,
we all have
you're-
our calendars with
you're
us.
fantastic.
So thank you for taking the time to be able to do this. So
this is better.
it's better than a doodle poll.
Yes. Okay. We done with C4?
Yes, sir.
C5, consideration, discussion, possible action related to the 2018-19 budget development process. Dr. Ely.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Members of the board, it is March, and so we are beginning to work through our budget development process. That's budgeting and staffing for the 2018-2019 school year. We're going to give you a pretty broad overview of what our budget situation right now is, and do some historical looks at our budget and preliminary thoughts as we move into this particular budget development process. I just remind everybody we're going to talk about this for the next 5 months or so. The actual action will take place during our August meeting, where the board adopts the budget and sets the tax rate to fund the budget. So with that, Mike Martindale, Deputy Superintendent and CFO, will take us through our initial presentation on the 2018-19 budget. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Dr. Ely. If you would all take your calendars out real quick. As
Better than checkbooks.
true, as Clark mentioned, this will be a process over the next 5 or 6 months. So today is just a very, very broad stroke as far as beginning the process to even look at things as we start considering our budget for the 18-19 school year. As part of the presentation today, I'll take a few minutes to visit some historical data, like our past tax rates, past budgets, enrollment trends, those types of things. Also take a few minutes to just kind of give you an update as far as where we're tracking with our current budget, and that'll be reflected in your financials at the regular meeting, your board agenda items for the regular meeting. We'll look at some timelines associated with the development of our budget for 18-19. Also talk to you a little bit about the process we use as far as allowing principals and directors to request new staff, and our exceptional item request process, which allows them to request items beyond their regular allocated operating general fund budget. So we'll speak to you a little bit about that, give you some ideas of some of those requests that have been submitted, and what kind of numbers we're looking at with those things. And then again, a very broad stroke of just some early numbers with our 18-19 values. And as I mentioned to Cabinet this morning, don't fall in love with any of these numbers. Not that you would want to, but know that they're going to change a lot through the course of the next several months. Historical data, we'll start with enrollment. Going back to 2010-11, we were 10,535 kids, up to PEAMS snapshot, which was this past October, this fall, at 13,650. So you can see the growth of the district throughout that period of time. You can look at some significant years or some significant jumps in 13-14, 14-15, and 15-16. You'll see those in some other graphs here shortly. Flattened out a little bit as we moved into 16-17, and we're picking up pace again, or tracking back to as what we did previously after last year. During this course of time, from 2010 to current, we've added over 3,000 students. And if you think about our enrollment being a little over 10,000 in 2010, our district has grown almost by a third during the last 7 years, which is a tremendous amount of growth, but you're all aware of that because we're opening campuses on a pretty steady basis. Average daily attendance. I wanted to visit with this one a little bit because sometimes folks get this confused with enrollment. When average daily attendance is one of the key drivers as far as determining your state funding. Enrollment does play a factor in this, but it's separate. You can have your enrollment can go up a certain amount. For example, our enrollment is up 3.4% this year. However, our average daily attendance, those kiddos have to come to school, is separate of that, a part of it, but it's their attendance rate as well. So we're tracking at an increase this year of 3.1%, even though our enrollment increase is 3.4%. And that makes perfect sense if you think about December, January, February, and all the talk of the flu. So obviously we took a hit on attendance rates. So that is why that was tracking a little bit lower than enrollment. Typically, our average daily attendance tracks a little bit stronger than our actual enrollment number. But here's historical values. I mentioned some of the higher enrollment years previously, so it makes sense that those attendance, those ADA numbers are higher. The low year we experienced last year, and again, kind of getting back to more of what past history looks like this year at 3.1 through the 4-6 weeks. We have averaged, if you average all these years, equally 3.8% average growth for ADA since 2011, which is good, steady growth. Property value increase since 2012. You can see the increase over the prior year all the way through 2017. Significant growth through this history of time. Understand this is current property appraised value. This is new stuff coming on board as well. So this growth also captures our collective tax base. New construction, new houses, new commercial development, those types of things. So a very significant growth in our values through the course of time. This is also, this associated with a dip here is what has pushed us back into recapture that you've heard me discuss previously. The average growth through the course from 2012 to 17 has put us a little bit over 7% for property value growth through that course of time. Tax rates, the M&O, which is our operating, our day-to-day tax rate where we generate that revenue, has been consistent since 2012 at $1.04. The year prior to that, it was $1. The board at 2012 captured 4 golden pennies. I believe that was opening of College Station High School to try to manage some of the costs associated with that. The red is our INS, that's our debt service rates. Remember the 2015 bond here, we sold the first half of those bonds in January of 2016, which was about $67 million. So that would have been captured, bringing that debt on board in the INS rate for 16-17. And then we sold the other half, remember, January 2017. So that's why you see this tick up just a hair in 17-18. Not much, again, change with these, even though we brought a significant amount of debt on board, but it's because our property values have such momentum at this point in time. We will have a lowering of our INS rate when we move in that 18-19. There's too many variables to tell you exactly what it would be, but there will be a lowering of the INS rate whenever we come forward in August. I just like this slide, and this is why I put it in here. If you care to listen to any of the conversation coming out of Austin about school funding, the state funding of public education, and so on and so forth, I would encourage you to just reference back to this slide because it pretty much just tells the picture for everybody. Without the legend, I debated just leaving that off there. It's not really necessary because this is no secret to anyone. The blue line and those data points are the local revenue in our M&O general fund throughout the course of those particular years. The red is the state's contribution or state revenue that's been contributed to the district for those corresponding years. Those come from our audited numbers. For example, I'll go back to 11 and 12. our local values, and 99.5% of this number is property values. I do have like interest income and some other small revenue pieces in there, but they're fairly insignificant to that big number. Local values are 62.8 million of our budget. The state contributed 10.4. The state would tell you they contributed about 14.8 because they would like to overlook the fact that the district submitted a 4.4 million recapture payment in this particular year. So I did take the liberty of subtracting that back out. So the number you see is actually what was recognized by the district. We did have recapture payments in 11 and 12. Those are why those particular years have asterisks. If you can see, the state's number moved a little bit. It's up to 16 million in 15-16. Obviously makes sense if you remember our enrollment, our ADA numbers. That's why that number ticked up, because with more kids, higher ADA. Again, not 6 million is nice, but when you think about the burden the local taxpayers carrying in this at 82.4 million, we do appreciate their effort, I guess. So anyway, I'm sorry, that was not necessary. As we move out to the 17-18 school year, these are our adopted numbers. Obviously, we don't have our audited numbers yet. The 6.5, this is taking consideration a recapture payment of about $5 million. So I backed that out of this particular number. Now, I will tell you not to spoil the surprise later as I talk about the 18-19 budget. If I were to project out on what I'm using this evening, very early to you, next year you will in fact see this line go below zero because our recapture payment will exceed what the state will be contributing to our effort. So just a little interesting fact. I thought I would share this with the group. Student.
Move off that. Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Just for clarity. So what you're saying is, in essence, the state on the 17-18 contribution, they send us basically $11.5 million and a $5 million bill. So
yes, sir.
we have to pay them, turn around and send them $5 million back.
Absolutely. At least they give us over a 6-month period to pay it.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. We just began that payment in February, and that will continue through the course of the remainder of this year. There'll be a settle up in probably July, August, because again, that's kind of a moving number depending on where we end the year with our ADA and those types of things.
So if it goes in negative, they even take the time to write us a check?
They'll still send us money, and then we'll send it absolutely.
They're
That's
not gonna be efficient
absolutely
about it.
right. It makes the books look right. All righty. Here, student data. I apologize. We still have a lot
Please
to
do not
go.
apologize for telling the truth.
Okay, student data, 10 and 11. We know the enrollment and the growth in our enrollment. I thought this was interesting because it tells you some of the change as far as the students that are the needs of the various students that we have in the district. For example, the number of special education students we had in the district in 2010, 807. From this fall, our PM submission, that number is over 1,200 now, or a 57% increase since 2010-11. You can see the bilingual number as well, going from a little over 800 to over 1,500. Our free and reduced lunch numbers from 3,500 to over 4,500. And again, our district grew collectively from that time, student population at about 30%. So you can see that's about the same rate our free and reduced lunch numbers grew. Bilingual, almost 100%, and special ed numbers over 50%. So it tells you, it shows you a little bit about the changing dynamic also of the needs of the kiddos within our district. General fund budgets through the course of the last several years. I just went back to 13-14. We adopted just shy of a 3.9 deficit, audited at 2.4. There were no recapture payments these last several years. Of course, there was the year prior to that. I didn't go that far back on this one. You can see that The last several years, we adopted deficit budgets. We've been able to come in on the positive side, put a few dollars in our fund balance with no recapture payments necessary. In 17-18, we adopted a 2-4. Of course, we're in the middle of, or in that budget year. I'm projecting that we'll land at about a 5 million, 5.2 million by the end of the year for our recapture payment. I still have it in the financials at about 5.4. We'll clean that up as we move through the 5th and 6th weeks of the school year. Current, and again, this is reflective again of the financials in this month's board packet. We adopted a $98.8 million on local revenue. That's been adjusted up to 99.1. That is really just a change in interest income. Dr. Wesson, interest rates they're skyrocketing. So we're capturing those rates 1.5%. We're getting there. So that's where some of that change has been captured so far. State revenue, really haven't moved that number. It'll creep up a little bit because we adopted a budget based on 2.9% and we're running a little bit over 3. There's a weighting system built in there for those kids as well. If they're identified as receiving different services, there's a little more funding involved with that. We're running higher with some of those weights. So this number, I think by the end will generate a little bit more revenue, nothing real significant for us. The federal revenue, the SHARS, the School Health and Related Services, this is services or medical services the district might provide that are Medicaid reimbursement opportunities from the federal government. Ms. Perry and her department, Ms. Parks and the business office have been working diligently probably last year or so as far as these potential reimbursements, and they're starting to pay dividends with that. Recently, we entered into service with a provider to help us with these reimbursements as well. So you can see the difference in that revenue source just this year. So we originally budgeted 500, and we've amended that up to 1.4 so far, and I'm using 1.4 to project out from this point forward as well. Recapture, we adopted a 5.9. I have 5.4 in the financials. I do think we'll come closer to 5.2 or 5 million before we're finished, since we're tracking a little bit better. Originally adopted a deficit of 2.4. We're tracking at 2.1. We have been able to, as the board's aware, last month, I believe, capture new band uniforms for College Station High School for consideration this evening. As a possibility of athletic apparel for our 2 of our middle schools out of the general fund. We were also able to mid-year, due to some of these adjustments in our revenue, pick up some additional positions, add some special education teachers in the district. We were also able to pick up some operations positions. We are growing so quickly and adding staff and teachers to schools, we get behind on the operations side. We need more HVAC people, more carpenters, more plumbers. And so we really haven't been able to keep up with that, but we were able to capture some of those mid-year. We also were able to add a couple of positions to College Station High School due to their increased enrollment. So that's where some of this recognized revenue we've invested back into things. Timelines for 18-19. HR opened just general candidate pools for 18-19 on March 8th. We typically do that just before spring break. March the 9th, requests from directors and principals were due for exceptional item requests. Again, those are the things they're asking for, one-time expenses beyond what they have in their general fund. New personnel staffing requests or considerations for next year are also due the Friday before spring break. Of course, this is tonight, our first little glance at the budget. Principals and directors have to submit their non-personnel budgets back to the business office by the 27th. So this doesn't have any staffing in it. It's simply just their operating, general fund operating budget. You see the board meetings in here from April, May, June, July, and August. We'll tighten this up a little bit each month. especially after April 30th, we get some preliminary values from the appraisal district because that's the big driver on our revenue side. That would give us a good indication of what exactly we can or possibly can do with a whole lot of different appropriations. We shoot for June as far as compensation or salaries or raises for the next school year. We did it in July this past year, but it was a legislative session, so we weren't really sure what was going to happen with school finance, which nothing did, so we could have done it in June. We'll get our official values on July 25th, and of course will come August and with the proposed budget and tax rate. Exceptional item request. The process with these principals, and again, directors submit these, they're given these and they submit them, and there's a rationale and those types of things. The folks that made these requests will meet with cabinet this Friday all day to review those so we can try to prioritize because to see exactly what we need to do. As far as new personnel requests, those total $4.5 million. I'm sorry. Oh yes, it's a spreadsheet full. This is just a real brief glance at. Yeah, that is 85 teachers for Pecan Trail. No, I'm kidding. It's 4.5 million collectively, and there's a spreadsheet full. These are just some examples. For example, Pecan Trail does need some additional teaching positions at 6th grade because as we opened that school, we staffed a little lighter in 6th grade because of grandfathering impact. There were a lot of those kids at Hoyle Tide, at Oakwood, and Cypress Grove. College Station High Schools requested additional staffing as well as College View High School, CSHS due to increased enrollment. Fine Arts, both Consolidated and CSHS have requested consideration of some assistant directors in our band, choir. I think College Station High School requested assistant orchestra. Also consideration of district level, that's Director of Fine Arts. Special programs, I've been speaking about special programs, and you saw the growth in that area. So there's a number of requests to consider as far as special education resource teachers, instructional assistants, those types of positions at the campus level throughout the district, as well as a number of district level positions. For example, a licensed school psychologist, speech pathologist, those folks at the district level, art facilitator to support this growing population that we have. District level consideration of coordinator for social studies. We have the other 3 core areas, coordinators in those areas at this point in time. This would be for social studies as well as from some additional days for all existing coordinators to work on curriculum update and of course operations. We're opening more buildings, more square footage, takes more people to take care of them. Exceptional item request, athletics, a number of requests from athletics, from things like tennis court resurfacing to some new lockers and baseball, football areas, furniture requests from different campuses, for example, just some cafeteria tables at different campuses, stackable chairs, to at the high school desk and replacing furniture in career and technology areas as well as science labs, district level professional development for GTN, again operations. If you approve staffing, these people need a way to get around, so there's tools and trucks associated with those positions. So I've said a lot, but those are some of the examples, and I assure you I abbreviated them. Parameters. So just right out of the gate, again, these are just starting points. If I look on the revenue side, I use 0.3% ADA, okay? A growth increase. Remember historically of what I showed you before, we've averaged over 3.8. The reason why, again, and I put this out in the notes, is when Templeton came to us, they gave us 3 different scenarios associated with the possible impact of the charter school. The 2.95 is if there were no charter school opening, I would be using almost a 3% growth here, or an addition of 400 kids. The low is low impact, so I'm going right in the middle with this, with us remaining about stable where we are, maybe the addition of about 40 kids. high impact would not only absorb our growth, but take students away from our current count. So I'm utilizing a 0.3 for this particular example, just to be as a starting point. Local value, I'm using a 7%. We've had 7.2 over the last average over the last 6 years. Here's the last 4 years. Feel like that is probably conservative at this point. Again, we'll know a lot more as we move into April and start getting values from the appraisal district. This one, this one will move, obviously. This one is going to be the one that we have to keep an eye on as we track over the next several months. As far as appropriations, I have $1.3 million set aside for salary adjustments. Last year, we did $1.2 million in raises and invested $800,000 to implement the new TASB salary schedules they did as a result of our TASB salary schedule, our study. I don't have anything at this point set aside for health insurance increases. We didn't when we started last year either. We get those premiums in June, and we kind of take a look and consider those. We did end up increasing the district's contributions by $10 a month per an employee or participant last year, which cost us about $150,000. Nothing across the board as far as supplies and materials. I do have an extra $70,000. We're changing the way we're generating the campus budgets. In the past, for example, middle school has got X dollars, high school has got X dollars, regardless of anything else. Elementary school has got X thousands of dollars. We've adjusted that to Mrs. Parks and myself and several people work through this. We've adjusted that to a per pupil allotment so that it reflects the enrollment of the school, because we have elementary schools now with 750 and 420. So it accounts for that variance. We've also generated some weights so that we can apply a little additional allotment to a kiddo that maybe receives other services. So we've created a weighting system. We just think this is much more, it's not equal, but it's equitable, if that makes sense. So this is going to probably cost us a little bit more collectively, but I think it's an excellent investment in our resources. I do have $500,000 set aside for exceptional items and new staff, so I got to take that $6 million and squeeze it down to $500,000 through the next quarters. I'm just kidding. We'll work on that number over time. Yeah, I said, turn around and say that to that group. No, yeah, they didn't think that was funny at all. Did I feel it? I can kind of, yeah. Actually, though, we started with the 500 last year, and I very right out of the gate, and we were end up managing to do over $1 million. So again, these are starting points. There are still so many moving pieces that it's just simply a starting place for us. Weber Middle School is running us a little over $2.4 million to get staffed up. Contrail was 1.4. The difference, I have the principal salary for next year for River Bend in this number as well. Of course, the difference is really extracurriculars. You have coaching staffs now. You're a little staffed up more as far as fine arts directors and those types of things. You have some CTE courses that aren't offered at the intermediate level, so it costs more to open a secondary campus. Our recapture payment, again, 5.2 is, $5 million, 5.2 is where I'm projecting we'll land. And lo and behold, an early recapture projection of 14 million. So that would send that below that zero. It's driven by this number, okay? So goes this number, so goes this number, okay? So understand that those will move in unison. If we have more kids, then you've got that property value divided by more kids, then this number will go down. If it's the other way around, that number goes up. And where you'll see the difference is not in the state giving us more money, they're just going to allow us to keep our own money, so to speak. So anyway, those are early numbers. If I just add and subtract on those, here's the revenue piece, the appropriations, and this is just where we'll start whittling away at. And again, this is with 7% on property values, 0.3 on ADA. Last year in March, I think we were starting at over a 5 million mark. So we're a little bit ahead of where we were at that point in time last year. So
So there's a good chance, in essence, we're gonna be paying the state in order to teach our kids next year.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm debating whether when I send my taxes in, just make it out to the state of Texas or actually to the appraisal district. I'm sorry. So
Like
we'll continue.
sassy Mike
to watch-
Martindale.
It is.
This is,
But it's very, if you look at, I mean,
salty presentation.
yes, sir, this starts,
Should be.
it brings it home. It does. We'll watch these things. Will drive exactly how we progress over the next several months. Our ADA, of course, our enrollment, preliminary values, drive these other things and what we're able to do with salaries ultimately, and what might be able to approve out of those requests for next year. So I went a long time. I apologize for the off-cuff extra comments, but I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
I think Dr. Wesson hit it pretty good. We're going to pay the state to teach our kids here locally.
And there's a whole lot of other folks like that.
There are a whole lot of other folks who are in the same situation, about somewhere around 200 school districts that are under the Chapter 41 system, and many of them are revenue contributing like us. And when I say revenue contributing, we contribute revenue to the state general fund. That's where that money goes back to. It doesn't always go back to help other schools that have lesser economic means and lesser property values in their communities. It's a funded, it's a hole in this general fund that the state uses to appropriate how they see fit. So it is a complex issue. We wish that the state would continue to contribute more, or actually contribute more of a percentage of the overall cost of educating Texas public school children, and rely less upon local property taxes to fill their budget. So hopefully we will have the opportunity in 2019 to be able to address this at the legislative level as well.
Has there been there's a committee that was put together because of the last legislative session, right?
Yes, sir. They're meeting now. In fact, they took invited testimony today or yesterday. It's a joint interim committee on school finance that was called for through last legislative session. And so the appointees there is one public school superintendent who's on that. There's some other folks who represent different organizations. I'd have to figure out, I think they're a Chapter 42 district, but he used to be in Hutto, which is Chapter 41 district. So he knows both sides of this, and he's been a voice for public school kids there. And CFO from Austin ISD is there. So there's, but I don't know what is going to happen as a result of this. What you see a lot of times in these joint, these interim subcommittees, as they do their work, they do a lot of gathering of information. It doesn't always result in legislation, and even if it does result in bills, it doesn't always result in a bill being passed. So we'll see what they have to offer for us. I just personally, I'm not really confident that we're going to get much of an answer from this joint subcommittee as far as a way to more fully fund education for Texas public school students.
I think it's worth pointing out. I think this is a complicated thing for most people, that when they hear the notion that we're sending money back to the state, the assumption is that we're turning around and we're helping to fund school districts that are underfunded with that money. And I think there are some people who kind of look at that and take solace in the fact that even if we're putting money into the system, at least it's going to educate kids. And the truth is, it's not going to educate kids. That money goes back into a fund that legislators can choose to do whatever they want with it. And it's clear what they're not wanting to do with it is to increase funding for education across the state. And for every single time a lawmaker turns around in the state and tells you you should be upset about your increasing local taxpayer money, And the fact that it seems like we're paying more and more every year into local taxpayer funds, you can turn around and tell them, well, if you would just start sending some more money instead of cutting funding for exactly what you're complaining that we're starting to charge more for, that maybe some problems to get taken care of. And I think this whole thing is a nightmare, and we've clearly got a group in Congress right now in Texas that are unwilling to do much of anything about it, other than the fact that they enjoy funding charter schools using our local taxpayer dollars as well.
I would point out that the Texas House did during the regular session pass comprehensive school finance reform. It made it out of the House. It did not make it out of the Senate, excuse me. It was sentenced in the Senate. But the House has had some leadership and has had a vision for protecting Texas public school children and has acted on that and just wasn't able to ultimately pass the political hurdles it needed to cross in either the regular or special session earlier this year, or excuse me, last year.
Well, let me see if I understood that correctly, the last few slides you put up. It looked to me like without the you don't have to bring them up, without the recapture payment that we have to send to Austin so that they can spend in their general fund however they see fit, we could balance our budget and give our local taxpayers somewhere between $9 and $10 million of property tax relief.
About 9 million.
I'm talking about, yeah, because you're running.
You could do even more with salaries as well and still provide relief. A percentage point on our values right now will net us $900,000, $1 million.
Right. So it's interesting then to hear word out of Austin that says we are taxing too much locally when they're taking almost 15 million under our current projection for next year directly out of our local taxpayers' pockets that we don't get a choice about. We have to pay the state first. I'm just making sure I got that right. Okay.
Sir. And as they made their budget projections for this biennium, this 18, 19, 19, 20 biennium, they didn't restrict themselves to 2.5% of revenue growth either. They counted on the local funds being recaptured from districts like us, well more than the governor's proposed cap that he has on local governments. That was cathartic.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sure they'll all turn in to watch this on video anyway. So.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, item C6, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to student drug testing. Dr. Ely.
Thank you, Mr. Harris, members of the board. As Mr. McIntyre makes his way up here, he'll be spending most of the time kind of talking through this particular agenda item. But I wanted to just spend just a couple minutes just visiting about this particular issue. We've been talking as a board and as an administration for the past couple months now about safety and about safety of students. That's been manifested itself in some terrible tragedies that we've seen, including one, if you've seen what happened today, I believe it was south of Washington, D.C. And we have been working a lot on school safety and continue to meet and address needs of our particular students and our campuses. But as we look about safety, safety is more than just being able to respond to active shooter scenarios and those types of things. There's all sorts of other types of safety issues that bears our attention as we look at school kids in College Station ISD. We know that throughout America, drugs and alcohol with adolescents and young people is an issue. And we'd be fooling ourselves to think it's not an issue in College Station ISD. We have had, I've had people who've come up to me and just had the conversation about these types of issues in regards to school safety for our adolescents and our young people in the school system, and just kind of ask the question: is there something that we can do? Is there something as a system that we can do to help kids, to help families, to help kids make better choices? And there are things that we do. We do education, and we do things like the Shattered Dreams program that College Station High School just did just a week or two ago, right before spring break. So there's things that we do on education, but is there something more? Visit with a couple board members and ask the question: is this something that perhaps we should embark upon, at least having a community discussion here at the board level in regards to the possibility of adding a student drug testing policy to our board policy, and bringing a program here back to College Station ISD. We've actually had a program here in the 1990s, so that predated my work here in the school district. You know, we had a drug testing program from UIL for steroids and performance enhancing drugs in the early 2000s, and that went away quite a while ago, I'm guessing, as I remember. But is it time for us to consider, is this a route that we need to go for the protection of our students, to give students an opportunity to have an out? So I want to just start that conversation. This is not an action item tonight. I imagine this is a beginning of a conversation over a number of meetings, because there's a lot that could be involved in this. If this is a road that we want to go down. So I've asked Mr. McIntyre to do a lot of work, and he has, in looking at board policies from a number of school districts, look at different aspects that go into whether we have student drug testing policy, and what that could mean for College Station ISD. So he's going to share quite a bit of information with you, just to kind of use this as a background to shape our conversations that we have over the next months as we discuss this. So with that, I'd like to recognize Greg McIntyre, Chief Administrative Officer, and you've got a quick presentation for us.
I do. I just need the screen to come on. Okay, there we go. Really what we want to be able to do is take a look at just a few starting points for our conversation, and taking a look at it, and really have a chance to gather the level of interest on the board to see if this was something that we wanted to continue taking a look at. But with that, start with just a few of the starting points around random student drug testing. What is it that we mean? And so what I'd like to do is just very quickly take a look at why we might drug test, who might we test, what might we test for, and when could it possibly begin? We just start with those four. And so why test students, as Dr. Ely alluded to, certainly the safety aspect, but also the health aspect of all students who might participate in extracurricular activities, and students who seek parking permits on our high schools. Also to serve as a deterrent to the use of illegal drugs, possibly performance-enhancing drugs and or alcohol. It certainly offers kids credible means to resist peer pressure. It provides, to be quite honest with you, some cover and reason to tell those peers, no, I could be drug tested, and so it's much easier for me just to go ahead and use that, and everyone understand that that's part of the participation with either extracurriculars or driving on campus. And then lastly, also to provide a source of information to parents for any student who might be using illegal drugs, performance-enhancing drugs, or alcohol. Who could be tested? Well, we could possibly test students in grades 7 through 12 involved in those extracurricular activities, and as I mentioned earlier, those who have a parking sticker. We could also ask parents of students who might not fall into those categories for grades 7 through 12 if they would like to voluntarily include their children in that group that could be randomly tested. And then how that goes, how that occurs is that would be a computer-generated random selection process out of the entire group of students who would be in that testing pool. What could we test for? It depends. You can see certainly alcohol and anabolic steroids, what is referred to as a standard 5-panel drug test, and you can see those items listed there. But also, it could go a little bit further, and then you see the other categories, which is typically in what's referred to as a 9-panel drug test. Of course, the broader the testing, the more things that are included for, there's certainly an expense with that. But that would come later, I guess, in our decision making if this was something that we want to pursue. But really, just taking a look at what's possible to be tested among our kiddos. The results are confidential. Those would be protected, certainly within accordance with all applicable laws, and certainly kept confidential to parents, guardians, and those administrators who would have a need to know in case a student might need to sit out for a period from practice with regard to extracurricular activities or having their parking privileges revoked for a period of time. When could it possibly launch? Well, with the beginning of the 2018-19 school year. And it would really include three areas. Certainly, those who would sign up and register for the extracurricular activity, the parking, or those parents who would like to volunteer their kiddos. A standard orientation for students and parents to attend. And then, of course, consent forms that would go along with it. So there's really 3 phases as to beginning that for the 18-19 school year. And with that, we'd like to entertain any questions or comments.
Thank you. Well, let's start a discussion. Who wants to go first?
I think I'm in favor. I think it's a great idea. The question I have, so you have a consent form. Is that too loud? So you have an athlete or a parking student, and then you have then the parents still have to consent for them to be tested. And so if they don't consent to that, then they don't get a parking pass or they don't get to play the sport.
That is correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So they have to qualify for all 3 of those.
Yes.
I think it's a great way to give kids an out from the peer pressure that they face. I'm in favor.
Do you have any idea what ballpark percentage of school districts do have a policy that looks something like this?
I do not have a ballpark percentage, but I can tell you that we took a look at a number of school districts that do have board policy and do this type of testing. Large districts from Brazosport and Goose Creek, for instance, all the way to much smaller districts like Italy and Splendora, Dallas ISD, and others. There's also large school districts and others that choose not to. But there are a number, and with that, there's different variations. Some only extracurriculars, some extracurriculars in driving, some test only for athletics. So there are many decision points along the way, but quite a few. And then also a number of districts that choose different percentages of students to test. Some would say anywhere from 5% up to 20%. Others say only up to 10%, while others might say up to 50%.
Well, I have a bunch of questions. I'll give it to the group for feedback. Since we're just starting a discussion, I think it's nice that it follows our budget discussion because the first question is, how much does it cost? And I mean, I'm not expecting us to have full answers, and obviously that's going to vary depending on the scale, the number of tests, number of students, who you cover, what percentage, how often, all those things. But I think that's question one. The fiscal side of me would ask, what does it cost? But closely followed that is, it's drilling down a little bit more on the why and our purpose, and is it appropriate for us to be doing it? And to me, I'll get back to kind of my core beliefs and commitments. Is this going to lead to more student success? I don't know. Do we have any empirical evidence to back it up that districts that have these kinds of programs actually have better student success? And I think that's important. I mean, I struggle with the feeling that this isn't, I don't want this to be me imposing a personal choice on other individuals. I want it to be something that if we're trying to improve student health and safety, that we're really getting at it the right way and we're actually going to improve not only health and safety, but also student success. So that's kind of the 30,000 foot view questions that I would have. And then, kind of look at how did our past drug testing work? I notice we don't still do it. Why? How would we deal with things like false positives? Any Seinfeld fans will remember when she ate the poppy seed muffin and had the test show up. I mean, how do we deal with things like that? What does that look like? How do we deal with that and not negatively impact students? Prescription use of some of those things closely related to a false positive. If we're talking about students and illegal use, what about tobacco? I didn't see that on the list up there. Is that something we get into? I think we need to be able to answer questions like, well, if we're concerned about student safety and we're talking about parking permits, why aren't we looking at their driving record? If they have a bunch of tickets, what makes that different from a student safety standpoint than having a drug testing policy? And again, I'm not telling you I don't think we should do it. I'm saying these are questions that I think we need to answer and have answered. So when people ask us, we can say, oh yeah, we thought through it and we fully evaluated this, because I think it's important that we give it that thought. Let's see what else I have. Do we have any concern? And I think you can probably look at other places this has been used, that it would have a disparate impact on any type of protected class. Are we going to expose the district to potential problems if we have certain groups that are more negatively impacted because of how we implement this or what particular items we choose to put on the list? We talked a little bit about administering it, and I know some folks that live in one of these districts that have it, a drug testing program that has random testing. What they told me was their son, who happened to be the white National Honor Society student, has been tested 6 times. The star running back is yet to be tested. They don't have a lot of faith in their system in the community. How do we prevent that? How are we going to make sure that we have a real system? Okay, that's it.
So, Mr. Harris, there's some of these things we've got some preliminary information on. Some we don't, but we can certainly come back with that. But I think you're right. These and other things are things that, if we want to continue this conversation, that we'll need to wrestle with in regards to moving forward.
Yeah, I agree, and I certainly don't want it to be taken that the fact that I'm asking questions to be viewed as a negative towards it or to reflect on my views of it. I'm not sure where I stand on it, to be quite honest. If it's something we can put in place that will actually help give our kids a better chance to become critical thinkers, problem solvers, and obtain the knowledge and skills to be productive and responsible citizens in a global marketplace, I'm generally in favor of it, assuming we can pay for it. But I do think we need to make sure that that is actually what it will do, and it's not just, well, we like the idea of keeping these kids from doing drugs. I mean, one thing that occurred to me, I have two boys that are in high school and would clearly be covered by whatever we do. And I don't want them to do drugs, but I don't drug test them. Maybe I should. I don't know. It's causing me to rethink some of those things. Hope they're not hearing this.
I doubt they'll watch the video.
Yeah, they're not going to watch the video. He's not in government yet. But, I mean, you get the point.
I agree with all your points. I think we do need to have answers to all those questions, and I think that's a great discussion items. Those are great discussion items, but I'm in favor of it, and I want to get to the bottom of those. And like you, if we determine it's not affordable or that it's not the best for our students' success, then I might agree to not do it. But I'd like to explore all those points that you made. Absolutely.
And I will say that the terminology, credible means to resist peer pressure. I really like that. I think that that's a very, very good potential benefit of the program.
What about wall walkers? I mean, I think that's an area, we talk about athletes, but as we were in Fort Worth, I mean, that's where that term came from, is the wall walkers. I think those are the ones that feel isolated. And, they're not in any type of activities, but ones that might need help.
So that's one of the issues in regards to random student drug testing is, our students are compelled to be in school, and so they are not compelled to play football or be in the marching band or be in Skills USA or park on campus. So the drug testing policies that have passed muster from the courts are ones that test those kids who are involved in those optional items, extracurricular activities, parking on campus, those types of things. That's why they were chosen, because those are what these policies do. So for those students who are involved in school, who come to school and only go to school and are not involved in any extracurricular activities, they wouldn't be subject to that unless their parents opted them into the program. And this is an option for us if we wanted to move forward. But using this as an example, if we move forward with this and the parents opted them in, there would be no school extracurricular or parking permit discipline for them, but at least it would be information that the parents would have and they would be able to act upon them. And that's kind of that third bullet or fourth bullet about giving good information to parents and families.
Is there any concern that it would create a disincentive to participation? And I think that's probably some of that empirical.
And that is, and the people that we have talked to that have gone through the process of enacting these policies have not seen an overwhelming disincentive for people to be involved in these activities. Can I say that every person would 100% still want to be involved in it? Could there be a person who would not want to be involved because of their possibility of being tested? That's a possibility, but it hasn't been an overwhelming issue in the districts that we've studied.
Any way you can put video games on the list?
Fortnite?
Kidding. Fortnite, you got it.
That was my question, the disincentive part. But also help me out. So what exactly are the ramifications or discipline involved? I'm having a hard time understanding.
So that would be one of the things that we would want to discuss as we went through this policy-making process that we go through. But oftentimes, and we'll use athletics as an example, it might be first confirmed positive would be 3 weeks without participation in activities. Like games and perhaps practices, perhaps not practices. Again, these are decisions and discussions we could have. Maybe 6 weeks the second time, maybe 9 weeks the third time, maybe a full year, a semester, or something like that. For those folks who are involved in other activities like marching band or orchestra, those types of things, and they have public performances. It could be those types of things that are taken away for a specified period of time. Obviously, for people who drive, it would be suspension of parking privileges for a certain period of time. Those are the things that that generally, as we've looked at board policies in other districts, that they have used as consequences.
I would say, you know,
But I'd like to add, but it doesn't go and affect their grade for the course that they have. Even if they're in an athletics course, it doesn't affect their grade. And it doesn't affect them with law enforcement. Because this is a program that they're agreeing to, and their parents are agreeing to be involved with for this random testing, that the information would be given to the school and to the parents. Again, it's not trying to put more kids into the justice system. It's about giving them information and helping them try to be safe and healthy.
yeah, I mean, I guess my initial opinion is I'm inclined to be in favor of such a policy. You know, I've had 2 phone calls since our agenda came out, and we haven't even had a conversation in open forum about this. But obviously, we post our agenda ahead of time, and you know, both those individuals were very much in favor of adding this in our district as policy. So I'll be interested to see, you know, now that it's out in the open, the feedback that we get as board members, and I assume at some point we would take this to and ask people their feedback on any policy that we put back together. I think that'd be in our best interest. Just to, you know, if nothing else, see, I mean, we need to do, obviously, as a board, what we think is the right thing to do regardless, but, I mean, if we had a community that was really split 50-50 on this, it's obviously a much harder decision than if every single person who gives us feedback says, we think this is an important thing for whatever reason. So it'd be worth collecting that feedback in some way, or shape, or form, I think.
I mean, I just echo what Dr. Wesson said. When I first heard about it, I was my inclination was thumbs up, and it still is. That doesn't mean I don't think there are questions that need to be answered. But since the agenda was posted, I've had a few people contact me, and there was genuine excitement. And again, I think one of the questions you brought up was, why didn't this work? Or maybe it did in the early 2000s or in the 90s. But, you know, how can we do it better? But, you know, there's obviously going to be a financial cost. And, you know, we look at a $4.9 million deficit. That's a little scary, because I've done this before, and I know, you know, there's a real cost to it. There's a real cost in the implementation of it. It's going to put more on our staff. Just as you were talking about the parking permits, it's traumatizing to me to think about who's policing that out in the parking lot. I know it can be done, but again, my first inclination is you know, I definitely am interested in exploring it. Having had a student go through high school and 2 there now, you just hear. I know we don't like to talk about it too much, but I believe there is a perception that there's a problem nationwide, but we're not excluded from that. And I mean, Mr. Harris, you were talking about whether or not this is going to help, you know, students succeed. I would think if we're deterring drug use, success is going to go up. I don't hear about many kids who get off of drugs and then their grades crater. Typically, it's the other way around. And unfortunately, we've had a family friend that has got caught up in this in the last month. And what was the tell? Where the grades plummeted. And we hear too many stories about that. So, interested in a discussion.
Okay, so we'll bring this back next month and continue our discussion. And we've got some work ahead of us.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, item C7, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to TASB Update 110.
Mr. Harris, members of the board, you were emailed TASB Update 110, which I think is the smallest TASB update in the history. Enjoy it. So all we had here is we plan to bring this to the regularly scheduled meeting in May. No, what are we in? We're in April, excuse me. And wanted to give you the opportunity, if there's something that you had a question on that you wanted us to bring back information for, please let us know at this time. And hearing none, we'll be bringing that back to you at the regularly scheduled meeting in April.
Okay. With that, we are adjourned.